Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
Well, we've got quite the stream today, chat. I tried to ignore this discourse on the pride stuff because as somebody who has been fighting for equality for a long, long time, I thought that these were just dumbass idiots who I don't need to bother replying to. But it appears now that the online left is headed by people with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about literally anything. So I tweeted something yesterday that I think you should see. It's an important issue. Because for a lot of people, gay rights or LGBT pride is one of those things that it almost seems like it's always been that way. We've kind of evolved as a society, right? Where your sexuality is now accepted and it's not really thought of as a big deal. It's just a personal quirk, like what color your hair or eyes are. You know, it's not that big a deal. And that's important. That is, I think for some populations of people, that's absolutely true. But the struggle for equality is far, far from over. Right now, the most important issue surrounding the queer community and the trans community is the literal discrimination and bigotry being written in our laws around the country right now when it comes to transgender kids. And the discourse on it has become incredibly stupid. Incredibly stupid. A lot of people are now going out there publicly and trying to tone police pride. Now listen, I've been accused of being an authoritarian leftist before, meaning that I want to use the power of the state against capital. But I've never seen something so authoritarian as to try to police the expression of other people at pride parades. And the reason, as far as I can see, is optics. Now, I don't know if you have never been told this, chat, but you're not allowed to control the speech of other adults because you think that speech looks bad. All right? That's not how this thing works. So let's start this off by showing you my tweet because I want to talk to you about a little bit about pride, right? The tone policing shit has been happening for years. It's fucking gross. Yeah, typically from conservatives, right? And I want to point something out to you, chat. Every single person who doesn't come out openly in defense of the freedom of queer people to have the pride that they want is a reactionary fuck and knows nothing about the history of queer liberation or how we've actually gotten to this point. And let me tell you, it wasn't queer people assimilating, hiding in the closet, and waiting for one day that the straights would accept them. And then over time, the straights accepted them. That is not what happened. Pride is what happened. Queer people stopped being in the closet and they came out. And it was bad optics. Because at that point, being queer was something that could get you fired. Something that could prevent you from teaching children. In California, they passed law. They had what was known as the Briggs Initiative. Have you guys heard of the Briggs Initiative before? Here. I didn't review this ahead of the time. But let's talk about it. Gay history. California, November 7th, 1978. California's Proposition 6, aka the Briggs Initiative, against gay teachers was defeated. Protect our children. Preserve parents' rights to protect their children from teachers who are immoral and who promote a perverted lifestyle. Vote yes on 6. Former police chief Ed Davis, there's no question that homosexuals pose a threat to children. What was Proposition 6? The failed initiative would have banned gays and lesbians and possibly anyone who supported gay rights from working in California's public schools. The Briggs Initiative came on the heels of a successful anti-gay campaign headed by Anita Bryant and her organization Save Our Children in Dade County, Florida, to repeal its local gay rights ordinance. So you have people that claim to be on the left saying, we need to protect children, so you better not do anything adult. You better not wear any kind of, you better not celebrate your sexuality openly on Pride. We've got to protect our children. They are literally taking the arguments out of the mouths of homophobes. And Pride exists for exactly this reason. Pride is about radical challenges to heteronormativity, and it exists because queer people of generations past decided that they were done hiding in the closet. Fuck your optics. Queer liberation grew because it was bold, not assimilationist. Telling people to be in the closet, telling people they can't have pride on Pride Day is so reactionary, I don't even know what to say. This is what V said last year. This is what he says this year. Okay, hold on. Seen some people saying pride parades are dangerous because they're inappropriate for children. You see more skin at European beaches. Cry harder. And then this is what he says now. Kink at Pride makes people uncomfortable. It makes the event less accessible when accessibility should be a priority. Keep less family-friendly stuff to the many, many after parties and adjacent private venues every Pride has. The fact that this is controversial is insane to me. Pride should be a cool, queer-friendly block party you could attend to meet with organizers and get cute shirts. Everyone should be able to attend. It should be safe and uncontroversial. Dismissing accessibility as sanitation is really underhanded, disgusting strategy. Now, this is actually liberal corpo speak. And I'll tell you why it's so goddamn offensive. Because Pride exists exactly for what I said, which is this cis heterosexual nuclear family mores is something that's less than 100 years old. It is not the way that families are organized. And the reason why people like Vaush are liberals is because they do something which is accept the status quo, and they accept the arguments of the status quo, and they want to tinker around the edges. That's what a liberal does. Whereas radical socialists and queer people who believe in queer liberation want to see people who are free to express their sexuality and their personal identity with freedom. Now, that has nothing to do with endangering children. Children are brought into the mix by the bad faith homophobes. Do you see this? Protect our children. That has been the cry of the homophobe for decades. And Pride isn't queer friendly. Pride is about being prideful in oneself and rejecting the heteronormativity of our capitalist society. Now let's actually talk about that history. I have opinions on public sexual acts of consent, but Pride events are so clearly indicative of the consent that it makes concern trolling completely null and void. Absolutely, you should never do sex acts with anybody who does not consent. And nobody argues that you should. That is a straw man that doesn't exist. And trying to say that Pride should have floats sponsored by Raytheon and insurance companies is hilarious. Also, who is he to say that what is the way to accessibly celebrate gay pride? That's the thing that really rubs me the wrong way, is we're going to sit here as white men and go and yell at queer people that they're making us look bad? That is the most privileged, disgusting take. By going to Pride, you are consenting to witnessing people celebrate their sexuality. That's exactly right. I like Lil Nas X expression about how it's about queer liberation. If you have that link, that'd be great. In 2019, I went to Copenhagen. I was able to attend a Pride parade. It was insane and beautiful how many people, families, and kids are out the streets celebrating and love each other. It was awesome. I wish it was like that in the States. And that's exactly what it is. But you cannot declare, I'm going to set out rules for what Pride is, or else you are helping the homophobes. Fuck you. And the homophobia, racism, all are constructed in a way to support our status quo. Now, does that mean that capitalism can't adopt and make money off of both homophobia and pride? It absolutely can. If we don't rein in pride, the corporations that use it purely as a vessel to advertise won't be viewed as family friendly. Exactly. Pride is meant to be subversive. If you're offended by people's expression in an already constrained society, then you should take a longer look in the mirror. And that's exactly right. Let's talk about the history of pride, because apparently people need to know this. So let's talk about this a little bit. About why is pride a parade?
June is Pride Month. Yes, it's time to wave the rainbow flag and celebrate the activism, resilience, and history of the LGBTQ+ community. Each year, a growing number of cities hold their annual Pride Parade, a march that often features floats, protests,
Whoa, dude! Uh-oh, you have your shirt off. That's a little risque. That's bad optics. That's bad optics, dude. You wouldn't want to have the straights seeing you interacting sexually with another man.
Crowds of supporters living loud and proud. You might already be familiar with the history of the New York City Stonewall riots, the tinderbox that ignited the modern LGBTQ movement in the United States as we know it, and the reason Pride Month is still celebrated in June. Less familiar, however, is the history of the Pride Parade. So how exactly did a Manhattan riot become a march, and how did a march become the international occasion we have today? Let's dig into those questions and see what they have to tell us about pride, politics, and the ongoing evolution of community action. But before we start waving to crowds from floats, we're gonna have to look back at the history before Stonewall. While the riots were a milestone in LGBTQ activism, there's been a lot of activities.
Look at this chat. Homo nest raided. Queen bees are stinging mad. She sat there with her legs crossed, the lashes of her mascara-coated eyes beating with wings of a hummingbird. She was angry. She was so upset she hadn't bothered to shave. A day-old stubble was beginning to push through her pancake makeup. She was a he. A queen of Christopher Street. Look at the homophobia that was published openly and clearly. This was front page of a newspaper. Last weekend, the Queens had turned commandos and stood bra strap to bra strap against invasion of the Helmeted Tactical Patrol Force. The elite police squad had shut down one of their private gay clubs, the Stonewall Inn at 15 Christopher Street, in the heart of the 3-block homosexual community in Greenwich Village. Queen Power reared its bleach blonde head in revolt. New York City experienced its first homosexual riot. We may have lost the battle suites, but the war is far from over, lisped an unofficial lady-in-waiting from the court of the queens. We had all we could take from the Gestapo, the spokesman or spokeswoman continued. We're putting our foot down once and for all. The foot wore a spiked heel.
And events leading up to it. One important milestone was the annual reminder in Philadelphia, which provided a kind of blueprint for LGBTQ public gatherings movement.
Little Nas X said this, and it honestly hit me really hard. I think it's worth reading and internalizing. Far too many of our youth are struggling to find acceptance, he continued. We are taught to hate ourselves for who we are, and we are punished for living openly and proudly. I made the decision to be myself and open doors for the rest of my life. Some people say I'm pushing an agenda, and I am. It's called liberation. There's no roadmap when you're forced to break a barrier, and I hope one day it's no longer groundbreaking for queer artists to find mainstream success or win major awards. Until that day comes, there is work to do, and I will continue to do my part. With his unapologetic performance on SNL, Little Nas X has once again made it clear that he's determined to continue this work. So if you're out there saying now's the time to get back in the closet because the optics are bad, fuck you. 2006 school principal saying a gay student wearing a skirt while gay, his behaviors were inviting a lot of negative energy. Old TV wanted me to show you this straight parade.
عليهم كوكبة من طلبة كلية الشرطة من السنوات الدراسية المختلفة ثمرة إعداد نخبة من رجال العمليات القتالية ذوي القدرات الجسمانية الخاصة.
Wow, how macho they look. Oh, fucking.
ومن خلفهم مجموعة أخرى من طلبة الكلية خريجي كليات الحقوق
Holy
الذين
shit.
باتوا رجالا أشداء يظهرون أجسادهم الفتية.
How could they lose a war, chat? How could they possibly lose a war?
ونشاهد مجموعة
I'm sure they have a lot of
والمدرعات
esprit de
التي
corps.
تستخدم في المهام الخاصة تتقدمهم ناقلة القوات المنضمة حديثا لقطاع الأمن المركزي ويعلوهم نخبة من طلبة السنوات
Just a bros, bunch of bros oiling themselves up and flexing together.
كليات الحقوق.
What's wrong with this? What's wrong with a bunch of bros just loving each other and being oiled and being... What's wrong with this? Where is this? Egypt. This is the Egyptian flag. A lot of core strength to hold those poses on moving vehicles. Absolutely.
إنما نشاهده الآن لا يؤكد وبحق أن أجهزة الأمن تسعى بخطى ثابتة نحو التقدم والرقي لتواكب بأجهزتها ورجالها.
Holy fucking hell, that's amazing. Dictator Sisi's Egypt police. Is it a pride parade? No. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Moving forward. On July 4th, 1965, somewhere around 40 people gathered outside Independence Hall. Dressed in professional attire, they picketed for gay rights, becoming one of the largest known demonstrations for homosexual issues in the United States at that time. Organized by the East Coast Homophile Organization, two of its most prominent leaders, Frank Kameny and Barbara Giddings, placed an emphasis on assimilation. Kameny had been dismissed from public service for his sexual orientation and wanted to prove to all who attended the annual reminder that gay people could be just as professional and acceptable as anyone else. The annual reminder became the first gay rights event to be repeated and continued until 1969, the year of the Stonewall riots.
So look at that, chat. It originally started with a assimilationist theory. And how did that work out? They were targeted, they were fired, they were treated like garbage, and people didn't give a fuck.
Commemorating Stonewall will replace it from then on. The annual reminder wasn't without its critics inside the movement, however, as many wondered if the event's emphasis on normalness left out transgender and gender variant members of the community. Still, with the crowds it drew and the message it conveyed, the annual reminder showed that public community demonstrations, while risky, were worth considering as a tactic. Which brings us to Stonewall. The bar in Greenwich Village, New York, became the site of a clash between patrons and the police on June 28, 1969. It was a long time coming, as police had been regularly harassing bargoers at LGBTQ meeting places like Stonewall for years.
So, when queer people had their own spaces, and they largely kept quiet, they were assaulted, they were harassed, they were attacked. That is how it worked. Assimilationism has never worked, didn't work for black people, didn't work for gays, and the Asian community is finding out it's not working for them in the US either.
Years. That morning was no different as police entered the Stonewall Inn, arrested employees for selling liquor without a license, and cleared out the bar, the second time in just a few days. Only this time, the patrons waiting outside didn't clear and scatter. They heckled the police, threw bottles at them, and made their anger loud and clear. The police, who weren't used to this kind of behavior, asked for reinforcements to barricade themselves inside the bar while around 400 people rioted outside. The barricade was breached, the bar was set on fire, and all in all, the riots went on, stopping and starting for several more days. The late 1960s was a time of social upheaval, as other communities were also fighting for racial and gender equality. Stonewall was part of that revolutionary moment in history and asserted the LGBTQ movement as a force to be reckoned with. Stonewall became the rallying cry for change, and the riots were commemorated the very next year in what was called the Christopher Street Liberation March,
named
after the location
Dennis.
of the Stonewall Inn. We recognize it today as the very first Pride Parade. We actually have some accounts from the organizers of the first Liberation March. In the Village Voice,
Commemorating a riot is what Pride is.
Fred Sargent, who'd been present at the Stonewall riots, wrote about using the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop as a hub for the nascent movement. The bookshop became a busy intersection for budding young activist groups like the Lavender Menace and the Gay Liberation Front. It was these thinkers and activists who decided to keep the momentum of Stonewall going, and who would begin the tradition of the Pride Parade. But it was no easy task to get the all-new LGBTQ advocacy groups on the same page, and organizing the first march was a massive undertaking. Brenda Howard, sometimes called the mother of Pride, and later the founder of the New York Area Bisexual Network, rose to the challenge. Howard is credited with turning the march into a week-long series of activities, including a dance. This component would ultimately guide the march towards its evolution into a month-long event. 1 year after Stonewall, the first Pride March in New York City took place on June 28, 1970. It began on Washington Place and traveled along 6th Avenue before ending with a gay end in Central Park. The main goal was visibility. For a community that had been pushed to the margins of society, being out and proud was a revolutionary act. It was a huge success, drawing over 5,000 attendees, 5 times more than the organizers expected, and a new tradition was born, one that would last through the decades. Concurrent marches commemorated Stonewall in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago, which actually beat the New York City March to the punch by 1 day. In the beginning, most attendees wore their everyday clothes, but some began to wear elaborate costumes to punctuate the radical act of being seen. Over time, the event took on a more celebratory...
So in other words, why do people wear fetish gear? Or why do people cross-dress and wear drag? Because they are challenging heteronormativity. If you go to Pride and say, hey, stop being so queer, that is inherently homophobic. People are doing it for a reason, because heteronormativity isn't a law of nature, motherfucker. That's a social construct, and a radical activist should know that. A radical activist should support that. A radical advocate should be creating space for that and teaching other people, not going to those the marginalized and saying, hey, I've got advice on how you can convince the whites and the straights. You convince the whites and the straights. They are out and proud, and you give them space to be out and proud. If you don't like it, too fucking bad. That's what pride means.
Clothes, but some began to wear elaborate costumes to punctuate the radical act of being seen. Over time, the event took on a more celebratory tone, with Los Angeles becoming the first city to incorporate a festival component in 1974, a move credited to gay filmmaker Pat Rocco. And Gilbert Baker's rainbow pride flag first flew in San Francisco in 1978. Music and floats were added as well.
Sex, life, healing, sunlight, nature, magic, and art, serenity, and spirit. Whoa, what do those stripes mean, sex? We shouldn't have any of that at Pride.
When the organizers of the first Pride March gathered together, they couldn't have known what their event would grow into. Today, Pride parades are held around the world, and June remains not only a month to celebrate, but also to educate the next generation of LGBTQ+ people and allies on their history. Today, there are too many Pride parades to count, and some are even held in countries where lawmakers have attempted to stop them, like in Poland, Turkey, and even a refugee camp in Kenya.
I mean, this is the thing that's disgusting.
The legacy of
right now, Pride parades are being attacked in countries around the world and repressed harshly, and people are walking around in America saying, well, you know, it's because of the optics.
Pride has helped keep alive the stories of movement legends like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, both of whom are only now being commemorated with a monument in New York City. Johnson was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, and later went on to establish the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries alongside Rivera.
Bolt yourself in.
The group was dedicated
true,
to helping homeless young drag queens, gay youth, and trans women, and anyone else who needed help. But now, just as back then, there are debates over what Pride should be. Some have criticized the corporatization of Pride, with companies participating in sponsored floats and events.
Whoa. That's the whole reason we do it, right, chat? We want to have the corporations have floats, right? Wait, no? No, we're not? That's not why people go to Pride? Oh, It's not a corporate-sponsored block party? Oh, gosh. It's a commemoration of a riot. Gotcha, I remember now.
While others say the parade should go back to its roots as purely a protest. There are also lingering questions as to the inclusiveness of the Pride Parade. UK Black Pride, for example, was created due to the historic exclusion of Black people at Pride. A rainbow flag with a black and brown stripe was also created to emphasize the inclusion of LGBTQ+ people of color, and was met with both support and controversy. No matter what the future holds, one thing remains abundantly clear. The Pride Parade was born out of the bravery and activism of organizers who wanted to change the world, and it's here to stay. So, happy Pride, everyone! Hey Originauts, before you go, let me tell you about a new PBS Digital Studio show that I think you're gonna love. Prideland, premiering on our brand new documentary channel Voices, explores LGBTQ+ life in the American South. Join host Delon Burnside, aka Ricky from the FX show Pose, as he recounts his own coming out experience and travels throughout the South to meet people, breaking down barriers.
Conformity.
Be sure to check it out.
Conformity enhances profitability. Capitalism imposes conformity. It is intolerant. Of course. Of course. And so when people talk about, hey, this is what being an advocate looks like.
Is there any shocking doubt? The same people that would vote to cut defense $177 billion, the same ones that would put homos in the military, the same ones that would not fund BRAC, the same ones that would not clear up. No, I will not. Sit down, you socialist.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yield. Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman. Do we have to call the gentleman a gentleman if he's not one?
Committee will be in order.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized. And the gentleman from Vermont is recognized.
The gentleman from California, is he still here or did he disappear?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont rise?
I rise to speak in support of the amendment.
The gentleman from Vermont.
I wonder if I could question the gentleman from California. I am rising in support of the amendment.
The chair is in charge. The chair is speaking. The gentleman from Vermont has been recognized for a period of 5 minutes, and you may now proceed.
I thank the chairman very much and would like the opportunity if the gentleman from California would respond. Just to ask him a brief question, if I might. Now, my ears may have been playing a trick on me, but I thought I heard the gentleman a moment ago say something, quote unquote, about homos in the military. Was I right in hearing that expression?
Absolutely. Putting homosexuals in the military.
You said something about homos in the military. Was the gentleman referring to the many thousands and thousands of gay people who have put their lives on the line in countless wars defending this country? Was that the group of people that the gentleman was referring to?
I'm talking about the military people in the military do not support.
That's not what we were talking about. You used the word homos in the military. You have insulted thousands of men and women who have put their lives on the line.
I'm talking about you and liberals like you that keep the foreign defense.
Gentlemen,
reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman.
8 years in prison for taking bribes from defense contractors.
Gentlemen, one at a time.
Bernie Sanders, when he was mayor of Burlington, was fighting. Sanders went to bat for the LGBTQ community according to records of his tenure as mayor of Burlington, which are housed at the University of Vermont's Library Special Collections. When gay rights organizers planned Burlington's first ever Pride Parade in June 1983, 2 years after Sanders was elected mayor of the Queen City, they called on the Board of Aldermen to designate June 25th Lesbian and Gay Pride Day. This human rights issue is of great importance to our community, the organizing committee of the Lesbian and Gay Pride celebration wrote in June 6th letter to the board. Opposition to the proposal was strong, and in some cases, vitriolic. In its own letter to the aldermen dated June 16th, the Vermont branch of the Maranatha Christian Church argued against such a proclamation. We will express our sympathy with the sick humanity that is involved in this sin, but can in no way on God's earth and in light of his scripture condone or even sit back and not voice God's word. The church wrote as it requested permission to testify on the matter. After quite some debate, at a June 13th meeting, the board voted 6-5 in favor of designating the date of the march from the Lesbian Gay Pride Day, according to a contemporaneous story from the Burlington Free Press. Opponents such as the Alderman Diane Gallagher, a Ward 6 Republican, questioned why the march required such official recognition. Can't you just go out and have your party and enjoy yourselves and make your point without asking the city to have a proclamation, she asked. Sanders indicated at the meeting that he would sign the proclamation. In the city of Burlington and in the state of Vermont, people have the right to exercise their lifestyle, Sanders says. It's an American right, anyone's right to have a march. This is a civil liberties question. In our democratic society, it is the responsibility of government to safeguard civil liberties and civil rights, especially freedom of speech and expression, Sanders wrote. In a free society, we must all be committed to the mutual respect of each other's lifestyle. Some 350 laughing, exuberant people took part at the inaugural Pride March. Despite a spate of public vitriol over the past week, the parade and the rally that proceeded in the City Hall were without incident. Heckling along the played route was practically non-existent. The reason: Burlington resident Mikhail Carter was beaten up on Church Street. The reason: Carter was confronted by a teenager and accused of being gay. When he refused to back down or turn away, he was beaten unconscious outside of City Hall, the story reads. The irony is that the 41-year-old knife maker is straight. It really doesn't surprise me, she said. We knew that coming out would stir up the homophobes. The mayor's support for gay rights and the city's support is giving this town a bad name. Terrible optics. And he asked why the city wouldn't designate a day for Nazis if it was willing to do so for gays. Winooski's Eva Black penned one of the more caustic responses. How many of these abnormal, disgusting critters will emerge from their closets under the guise of aldermen? And Bernie is right, is there too, rubbing his hands with glee and expectation. As morals keep slipping, we will eventually celebrate Murderers' Day, Rapist Day, Alcoholics Day, Dope Day, Arsonist Day, and Child Molester Day. Or will a greater power give us the day of reckoning? Stand up, you weirdos, and give your brains an airing. Sanders didn't back down. The next year, the Board of Aldermen passed a resolution urging all levels of government to support gay rights, according to a letter in the archives from the Organizing Committee for Lesbian and Gay Pride Celebration, which invited Sanders to speak at its 1984 rally. It is my very strong view that a society which proclaims human freedom as its goal, as the United States does, must work unceasingly to end discrimination against all people. I'm happy to say this past year in Burlington, we have made some important progress by adopting an ordinance that prohibits discrimination in housing. This law will give legal protection not only to welfare recipients and families with children, the elderly and the handicapped, but to the gay community as well. Sipka wrote that for every person who marched in the upcoming parade, there will be a dozen who, because of fear, cannot. Such fears, he said, make us hide what it is at the center of our existence as human beings. Do we need a lesbian and gay pride day when our lives must be a struggle for peace and self-respect? Yes, he wrote. We are here in Burlington as everywhere. We are your children, your relatives, your friends, and your coworkers. We are gay. For all who cannot march, I thank you. Though Burlington was more progressive than the rest of the state, Sipka said, it was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, so there was real animus toward gay people. So that's what it looks like when you're an actual ally, you're an actual supporter, an actual friend. You take a difficult and unpopular position. You say, fuck the optics, this is what's right. And you let the weight of argument and your moral position and the humanity of those who can't speak, and that's how you do it. And you teach people, and you're bold about it. And in case you're wondering, Mike, why are you talking about this? Why are you spending time on this? Everyone accepts gays now. What do you mean? Trump carried a rainbow flag. Pennsylvania House Republicans just voted to not remove homosexuality from Pennsylvania's obscenity laws. Every single House Republican voted to kill the amendment. So that was yesterday. In Pennsylvania yesterday, how Republicans fought to keep homosexuality as against our obscenity laws. And people are trying to police pride. We need more pride. We need more people going out there and expressing themselves. And meanwhile, we're having a discourse about acceptable homosexuality. What are obscenity laws? Basically, they are laws against certain content. So the short answer is there's what's known as, I think it's the lemon test? No, it's the Miller test. Sorry. The Miller test is a United States Supreme Court test for determining whether speech or expression can be labeled obscene, in which case it is not protected by the First Amendment and can be prohibited. So according to the Republicans, homosexuality is obscene, and therefore speech about it doesn't have the protections of the First Amendment. Bernie has always been on the right side of history, and his speeches almost always age well, unlike the speeches of someone like Biden, who's never aged well because they pander to the basis instinct that we're destined always to evolve away from. You got it. Here's the Miller test. Whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest, which means your sexual interest. It makes you horny, basically. Whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct or excretory function specifically defined by applicable state laws, and whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. The work is considered obscene only if all three conditions are satisfied. And so that is why this stuff is so important. That is why this stuff is so important. We need to help PA flip blue to change the crap that goes on there. It's not flipping blue because there's gerrymandering. Emma Goldman was jailed under obscenity laws for giving people materials with info about birth control. Exactly. That is the situation that we face. That's the situation of why this stuff is so important, because this isn't old. If you're an old head, chat, if you're an old head, you know about this case. In America, homosexual sex and the privacy of your own home was only declared legal in 2003. It sounds like what Pepe La Vie wants is to just readjust our current norms because he's a lib, but the point of Pride is to say, fuck your norms. Exactly. And I want to read you, I know that if you've been here before, we've talked about this 6 months ago, we talked about it a year ago, but sometimes I think Pride Month is the month that we should go back and teach you this. Homosexual sex, same-sex relationships were not legalized until 2003 in America. I want to read you this case. Responding to a reported weapons disturbance at a private residence, Houston police entered John Lawrence's apartment and saw him and another adult man, Tyrone Garner, engaging in a private consensual sexual act. Lawrence and Garner were arrested and convicted of deviant sexual intercourse in violation of a Texas statute forbidding two persons of the same sex to engage in certain intimate sexual conduct. In affirming, the State Court of Appeals held that the statute was not unconstitutional under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, with Bowers v. Hardwick controlling. So the cops broke into someone's house, saw two gay men having gay sex, arrested them. It got brought before a prosecutor who prosecuted them. And then that conviction was appealed to the Texas Appeals Court, and they upheld the conviction in 2003. Do the criminal convictions of John Lawrence and Tyrone Gardner under the Texas homosexual conduct law, which criminalizes sexual intimacy by same-sex couples, but not identical behavior by different sex couples, violate the 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection of laws? Do their criminal convictions for adult consensual sexual intimacy in the home violate their vital interest in liberty and privacy protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment? Should Bowers v. Hardwick be overruled? Now, chat, it was on the screen there for a second, but what was this decision? How many judges voted that these guys should be let go and their conviction overturned? What was the split? Without cheating, what was the split? We got some 5-4s, we got some 6-3s, 5-4. What, no 9-0? No 9-0? You don't think all the judges agreed that this was in the privacy of their own home and that we shouldn't ban consensual sexual acts within the privacy of your own home? I thought that's what they wanted the government out of their lives, right? 9-0, right? No, yes, and yes. In a 6-3 opinion delivered by Justice Anthony Kennedy, the court held that the Texas statute making it a crime for two persons of the same sex to engage in certain intimate sexual contact violates the Due Process Clause. After explaining what it deemed the doubtful and overstated premises of Bowers, the court reasoned that the case turned on whether Lawrence and Gardner were free as adults to engage in the private contact and the exercise of their liberty under the Due Process Clause. The right to liberty under the Due Process Clause gives them the full right to engage in their contact without intervention from the government, wrote Justice Kennedy. The Texas statute furthers no legitimate state interest which can be justify its intrusion into the personal and private life of the individual. Justices Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, and Chief Justice William H. Rehnquist filed dissents. 3 judges in 2003 believed that you should be prosecuted for gay consensual sex. Yesterday, Pennsylvania Republicans still voted to keep homosexuality discussions as obscene, meaning they could be regulated and not protected by the First Amendment. So if you're out there saying, well, Pride should be a block party for corporations to rainbow wash themselves, you're a fucking loser. Is this a case where Scalia talked about fucking animals? You don't even want to know. You don't even want to know. I think if I search bestiality, hold on, it'll come up. Oh, here we go. Liberty finds no refuge in a jurisprudence of doubt. Most of today's opinion has no relevance to its actual holding. Respondents would have us announce a fundamental right to engage in homosexual sodomy. This we are quite unwilling to do. I do not myself believe in rigid adherence to stare decisis in constitutional cases, but I do believe that we should be consistent rather than manipulative in invoking the doctrine. Okay, he's complaining about stare decisis. He doesn't care about that. Let me see what's going on here. State laws against bigamy, same-sex marriage, adult incest, prostitution, masturbation, adultery, fornication, bestiality, and obscenity are likewise sustainable only in light of Bauer's validation of laws based on moral choices. Every single one of these laws is called into question by today's decision. The impossibility of distinguishing homosexuality from other traditional morals offenses is precisely why Bowers rejected the rational basis challenge. What a massive disruption of the current social order, therefore, the overruling of Bowers entails. This falsely assumes that consequences of overruling Roe would have made abortion unlawful too. It would not. It would merely have permitted the states to do so. First, I address some aspersions the court casts upon Bowers' conclusion that homosexual sodomy is not a fundamental right, even though, as I have said, the court does not have the boldness to reverse that conclusion. The court makes the claim, again unsupported by any citation, that the laws prohibiting sodomy do not seem to have been enforced against consenting adults acting in private. The Greek qualifier here is acting in private. Since the court admits the sodomy laws were enforced against consenting adults, I don't know what acting in private means. Certainly consensual sodomy, like heterosexual intercourse, is rarely performed on stage. If all the court means by acting in private is on private premises with the doors closed and the windows covered, it is entirely unsurprising that evidence of enforcement would be hard to come by. Surely the lack of evidence would not sustain the proposition that consensual sodomy on private premises with the doors closed and the windows covered was regarded as a fundamental right, even though all consensual sodomy was criminalized. There were 203 prosecutions for consensual adult sodomy reported in the West Reporting System and the official state reporters from the years 1880 to 1995. There are also records of 20 sodomy prosecutions and 4 executions during the colonial period. Realizing this fact, the court indeed says, we think that our laws and traditions the past half century are of most relevance here. The references show an emerging awareness that liberty gives substantial protections to adult persons in deciding how to conduct their private lives in matters pertaining to sex. Here we go, chat. I now turn to the ground on which the court squarely rests in its holding, the contention that there is no rational basis for the law here under attack. That proposition is so out of accord with our jurisprudence, indeed with the jurisprudence of any society that we know, that it requires a little discussion. The Texas statute undeniably seeks to further the belief of its citizens that certain forms of sexual behavior are immoral and unacceptable. The same interest furthered by criminal laws against fornication, bigamy, adultery, adult incest, bestiality, and obscenity. Bowers held that this was a legitimate state interest. The court today reaches the opposite conclusion. The court embraces Justice Stevens' declaration and Bowers' dissent. The fact that the governing majority of the state has traditionally viewed a particular practice as immoral is not a sufficient reason for upholding a law prohibiting its practice. So there you go, chat. A complete equivocation by these conservative judges of homosexual conduct as bestiality, incest, child pornography. That was 2003. Yesterday, if the conservatives had the power to do so, they would put you all back in the closet. This is not a hypothetical. This is reality. This ruling was made 2 years after the Patriot Act, so for 2 years they could have tapped your phone looking for terrorists and then arrested you for gay sex. That's crazy. They want to take us back to the Victorian era in Europe, where women dressed head to toe with no skin, showing them, and they're not allowed to be anywhere or do anything but their man's permission. That's how these fuckers think. Masturbation. Fornication means sex outside the bounds of marriage, chat. They want to ban sex outside of marriage. That's why gay liberation and queer liberation affects you too, even if you're just a straight guy or gal or non-binary pal. If you have more power than someone, remember to listen more. If you have less power than others, remember to talk as much as you listen. This is true democracy. Can't have premarital sex if you don't get married. And that is the situation that we are facing, is we have a society where people are openly and clearly in opposition to queer liberation or even sexual mores that all of you would consider to be totally normal. That is why we don't try to police people who are at pride parades, a parade celebrating a riot. Do you think riots are good optics? I'm old enough to remember when pride was about, pride. It's in the fucking name. It's in the fucking name. All right, chat, that's all I've got to say about that. It's just sad. I hope you learned something. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy. The morning politics guy. Politics Frogs in every single day. Same time, 10 a.m. Day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You got to follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid. And you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.